Hi everyone. So today we have a lovely discussion with myself and Katie Nash. And the topic of the conversation is why your inner child is yearning to be heard. So I'm Emily. I am a conscious parenting coach and somatic therapist. I help parents who are feeling stuck in fear, anger, and disconnection to find more peace and flow in family life. And Katie?
Hi, I'm Katie and I am a cognitive hypnotherapist. I help people with anxiety, phobias, confidence, and self-esteem issues, particularly people who feel like they're stuck and they can't get out of any of these issues. I help them change patterns on both a conscious and subconscious level, in the hope that those two things combined can create lasting change.
Great. And we found some crossover in our work around the inner child because that comes up very much in my work and also a lot in your work. So how do you work with the inner child in cognitive hypnotherapy?
Yeah, so in cognitive hypnotherapy, I work with the inner child in three ways. Um, the idea is that so much of our behavior, so many of our thought patterns begin in childhood. They begin before the age of 7, often as a result of a significant emotional event. And that doesn't even need to be huge. That can just be a child's perception of an event and they have a big reaction. And as a result, we develop these beliefs about ourselves or the world. Um, and they stick with us and they're there in the background the whole time and can dictate so much of our behavior and the way we interpret the world. So, as a cognitive hypnotherapist, I would use the inner child work in three ways. Firstly, I might regress you back to a moment before the age of 7, usually, and we try and find the moment when this belief or view began. And by going back there, we can reprogram that and change it. Reprogram sounds a bit of a scary word. It's not. It's just very gently talking to that inner child in a kind and loving way, in the hope that that will then change their view of the situation or the way they're viewing things. Another way I might work with the inner child would be through what's called parts work. We might introduce that child as a part of ourselves, because so often these bits of our child stay at a certain age. So I might say, let's bring up your 8-year-old child and we'll have a conversation. And I also work with parts in a slightly different way as well. It's really, really powerful work. And a lot of the time people get quite emotional, but sometimes that's needed. It's very cathartic and it's really beautiful.
Yeah.
What about you? How do you work with the inner child in your work?
Yeah, so I mean, I think one of the things about the inner child is the inner child is so present in those moments as a parent when we are reactive. So I think, it's one of the questions that I sometimes ask is like, how old are you in that response? And that can be an interesting question that can lead us down a pathway. And one of the things is that so many of the parents that I see are reparenting themselves whilst also parenting their children, which is really, that's a lot, but it can be really healing when you're able to show up for your child in the way in which you really needed to be showed up for at a similar age. And I think another thing is, I'm I do a lot of somatic work because I'm also trained in somatic therapy. And it's just interesting how lots of those things that you described that come up in your that you do in your cognitive hypnotherapy come up quite organically in the somatic work that I do. So it'll be like the inner child just comes in and is really present within the person's awareness. And one of the things that I help people to do is to one of my things is benevolent leadership. It's one of my
Mm.
kind of keywords that I use in my practice. How can we be benevolent leaders in our parenting? But in order to be benevolent leaders in our parenting, we need to be benevolent leaders to those own parts of ourselves that really need soothing and
Mm.
tending to. And a big word I use a lot in my practice is that word soothing,
It's love.
because often I find it's not that, yeah, sometimes people sort of want to push away these parts of themselves that they have like a troubled time with. And a lot of what I do is really resourcing and soothing that small part of themselves that really needed to be heard and needed to find belonging. That's a big word that comes up a lot in my coaching practice and my somatic work, is finding belonging, because when we feel like we can find belonging within ourselves, and it's so much easier to offer that belonging up for our children as well.
Yeah, yeah, really beautiful. So you find that belonging in you, and then you can find that belonging for those around you as well. That's really lovely.
Yeah. And you know, when you do this inner work, this
Mm.
inner child work with your clients, what do you see are the benefits from doing that?
The benefits are usually that they can see changes in themselves going forward.
Mm,
So often we can be aware that there's something in childhood that wasn't quite right, or
mm,
we might even be able to tap into exactly what that is. And like I say, it can create this negative pattern of behavior or negative pattern of thinking. I find that for my clients, when we tap into that inner child, when we speak to that inner child and let that child have a voice, let that
mm,
child need to say what it needed to have said to the parent or whoever it was at that
mm,
time, it's really empowering. And I notice huge shifts in my clients. They feel empowered to make change. They feel like they're showing up differently.
mm,
I encourage them to check back in with that inner child every now and again and see how they're doing. Send them love, send them reassurance, send them whatever they need that will be most beneficial for them to carry on showing up differently as an adult.
mm,
Um, because these parts live within us.
mm,
And we can try and there's one school of thought that you want to try and integrate all these younger parts of you into the whole to create this one unified person. But for me, I don't necessarily think that's that useful. It can be, some parts need to be unified, but other times be aware that you have this young playful child in you, and it's lovely to tap into that and play with that. They don't need to suddenly become a 30, 40, 50-year-old person. They
yeah.
can stay there and teach you things as well, which is really lovely. And when that teaching flows from the child to the adult, that's so powerful to witness.
Yeah, I love that. And it's just made me think, because I've done some inner child work before, and I had um an experience where I was just playing catch with my inner
Oh,
child. And it was like, it was actually a really powerful experience that wasn't emotional in any kind of, there was no sadness or grief, or it was just joyful. And
oh,
by the fact it was joyful, that was a powerful experience, to just have a joyful, playful experience with my inner child. So I really love what you've said there.
that's wonderful.
Yeah, and I think for me, what happens is with my clients, the benefits of doing some of this, the kind of somatic and inner child work that I do, is that they're able to recognize more clearly when they're feeling reactive. It's
Mm.
like, is this coming from an empowered adult place? Or is this coming from like a fearful inner child place? And if it is coming from a fearful inner child place, that's really useful information. And from that piece of useful information, it's like showing us, because my thing is, parenting is offering us constantly, because it can be very triggering. It's offering us constantly tools for personal growth. It's just like every time you're triggered, it's like, oh, hello, little invitation for personal growth. And, you know, if your children are anything like mine, then it's fresh material
Oh
every
yeah,
day.
every
So,
day. Every day I could be doing some healing.
yeah. And obviously, it's interesting, you know, with this thing you said at the beginning about how these limiting beliefs are formed in the years of 0 to 7, because obviously, my work with parents, a big part of this can be like, how can we be places of safe harbor and like hold space for our children during those 0 to 7 years? Not that we can prevent anything, you know, not that we can ever create, you know, a perfect experience. That's not what it's about, but just having that awareness that these beliefs are formed during that time in particular, you know, and being mindful about like positive beliefs that we can give our child as well. So, like, I don't think anyone gets through childhood without like some limiting beliefs or inner child wounding. That's, you know, not the aim. But also with that piece of knowledge, it's like, how can I be intentional about ensuring that I am creating this safe space for my child, who will one day be the inner child of an adult? And I think that's a nice way to think about it.
That's a lovely way to think about it.
Yeah. So, um, yeah, what do you think about like, what might be a kind of sign for you as a um practitioner, but also for an individual? What might be a sign that someone needs to, maybe not needs to, but you know, you're going to go down that route of the inner child
Yeah.
work? What would be the signal?
The signal, well, to be perfectly honest with you, it's something that I would visit with most of my
Yeah.
clients.
Mm-hmm.
Because so many people come to me because they want to make change. A lot of the
Yeah.
time, they've been to other forms of therapy first. They've been to see a counselor, perhaps. They've been to see a psychotherapist, and that they've often got to the root of the issue. And the work they do has been wonderful and really cathartic and healing. But sometimes they're finding that just becoming aware of the issue isn't always enough. You need to go into the subconscious and make some shifts in order to make actual lasting change. I
Yeah.
hear this time and time again. Oh, I think it was this, but
Mm,
I don't know what to do with that information.
mm,
And 9 times out of 10, we will begin by going back to those moments, having a word, having a chat with that inner child, and seeing what they need. So,
yeah.
in answer to your question, I'd say probably everyone could benefit from doing this.
Yeah.
Everyone that wants to make a change in their life, and they're struggling to do so, it might be because this thing that's going on is so deeply rooted in their subconscious mind, and it's from such a long time ago that the conscious mind alone isn't able to change it.
Yeah. I think that's so. I mean, I've personally experienced that as well. And, you know, in this somatic work that I do with people, it's very similar, because I feel like we very quickly in the somatic work, through getting into a place of being embodied and having an experience within the body, we very quickly get into that subconscious mind.
Mm.
And we start from asking the question, like, what's the body holding on to in relation to this issue? And that is, you know, another way of getting to a similar state that you work with clients in. um
Definitely a lot of crossover there. It's about that, isn't it? Tapping into
yeah,
that feeling. It's like a portal back. It's like a time machine. You follow that feeling, you follow that sensation, and then you're back there, and you can
yeah,
understand things a bit
yeah,
clearer when you can use that following the body. It's really
yeah.
powerful. It's
And
really interesting, the
I
somatic
think,
work.
sorry, say
Sorry.
again.
No, I was say it's really interesting, the somatic element of the work that you do.
Yeah, and it's really kind of rooted in the fact that, you know, from my own personal experience, and maybe we'll kind of go down this route now about
Mm.
where we personally come to this work. You know, I did a lot of talk therapy, and yes, awareness was raised, but for me, I really needed to get into that sort of deeper body embodiment, you know. And yeah, I've done some hypnotherapy as well. I'm interested actually, what's the difference between hypnotherapy and cognitive hypnotherapy? That's just my
Yeah,
curiosity.
no, good question, good question. So with hypnotherapy, you will work with trance states, you use
Mm,
regression, lots of different tools, all focusing on the subconscious mind. Whereas with cognitive hypnotherapy, we look at two elements. We look at what's going on in the subconscious, but we also look at how the conscious is playing a part of this,
mm,
explore that as well. And I'll give you some tools to use in the moment as well. We might be trying to, let's use anxiety as an example, trying to work on reducing your anxiety.
mm.
But that work is going on, that subconscious work is going on. And in the meantime, here's a tool that you can use your conscious mind to use, that can help you before that
Yeah,
work's kicked in, you know, so it's coming from two different angles. So
yeah,
it can, I've used this phrase already, but it brings it home. It creates lasting change
yeah.
rather than change that might come and go. It's something that
Mm,
by approaching from two different angles,
mm.
can create something that's lasting.
I love that because as well, it's good value for money. If it's lasting
No?
change. And this is one of the things that I'm always talking about in my work as well, because
Hmm.
everything that I approach in my conscious parenting work is, parenting for the long term, because
Yeah.
short term fixes lead to long term pain. And I think, we deeply need things that are going to be long lasting,
Hmm.
whatever modality we choose. So yeah, the next question we came up with was, what's your personal relationship with your inner child, and how's that changed and developed?
Yeah, it's interesting. If you'd asked me that question 5 years ago, I wouldn't have had a relationship with my inner child. After doing the work that I do and learning how this all works, I now would say I have a relationship with different versions of my inner child, and I will regularly go back and just check in and say, "Oh, how's the 7 year old me doing today?
Mm,
How's the 13 year old me doing today? What do they need? What does that part of me need?"
mm,
All sounds quite, unless you try this stuff, it all does sound a bit silly, doesn't it? Let's face
mm,
it, going back, but it's not. It's hugely powerful. And so for me, it's just a regular check-in to see what they could benefit from. What about you? Do you?
yeah, I think it's the way that I talk to myself has really, really changed.
That's
And I think I a lot of what I do in my practice is about like resourcing, and the word I mentioned already is soothing. And it's sort of like, I just feel like I have a much more soothing voice, a
that's
soothing internal voice that can come in and just be kind to those little versions of me when they pop up, and speak with so much more, yeah, genuine compassion to myself from, you know doing inner child work. And I think what used to come up for me, which I notice less and less, is like dislike for my inner child, which I think is really common.
mm,
And I think I've done a lot of kind of healing work on just befriending, and not being disgusted by my inner child, because that definitely came up for me, and I know that definitely comes up for clients that I've seen, this kind of disgust of their own inner child. And it's really been a healing journey through different modalities for me, to view that inner child. The word that's coming up in my head that came up in a session once, was golden. It's a kind of
oh,
weird, it's a weird word, but it sums up that, moving from kind of feeling quite disgusted by my inner child. And even as I say that word disgusted, it feels quite, I'm having like there's a painful reaction to that in my body, because that was how I used to feel, to feeling like my inner child is golden.
that's amazing. What a shift. That's
Yeah. And
powerful work.
I think it's a shift. And I also think it's a shift that has been lasting, but I also think it's a practice daily of showing up for those smaller parts of yourself as well. I think for me, it's like there's the bigger, expansive work, and then there's the daily practice of
Mm.
showing up and being kind to myself and speaking nicely and treating myself nicely, because ultimately if I don't treat myself nicely, I'm also not treating all those little parts of me too nicely. And being a mother now, like I see, how important it is to do that, because in treating my own kids nicely and showing up for them, I'm showing up for myself too. And I think that's why it's just, yeah, so all of it's so important.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I imagine it goes the other way as well. By showing up for yourself and all those parts of you, it means you're more able to show up for them in the way that you want to. It's kind of that knock-on effect. So you treat them well means you can see how you wanted to have been treated, or however that feels, and vice versa. You treat yourself well, then you can treat them well as well.
exactly. Yeah. So if people want to work with you, how do they go about that? And have you got anything to plug?
They can find me on my website, which is www.kncognitive.hypnotherapy.co.uk, or on Instagram. Drop me a message on either of those, and I offer a free 20-minute consultation, which is just a chat to see if it's the right thing for you and if I'm the right therapist for you. That's me. What about you? Where can people find
Yes.
you?
So we'll put it in the bit blurb underneath. But you can find me at findingflowparenting.coach, and you can find me on Instagram at findingflowparenting. And you can come see me for conscious parenting coaching, and I weave the somatic stuff into that. Or you can also come and see me just for somatic work, and all of the stuff is on my website. And I also do workshops and group coaching. So have a look on my website and on my Instagram for all of those things. Well, thank you so much, Katie. I've loved this chat. It's been really interesting. And
Hi.
it's making me feel like I'm going to come off this call and just hang out for a minute with my own inner child. And it's like a cue to be. So I would offer that as an invitation for anyone watching to, after this video is finished, take a couple of minutes, check in with your inner child of whatever age is occurring to you, and see what they're needing, and if they're needing a bit of soothing and support from you. So
Sounds
yeah,
lovely. Oh,
great.
well, thanks so much. I really enjoyed this chat.
Thanks.
Really good
Yeah,
to talk.
cheers.